How we doing out there, Color Commentary family? Welcome. This is Color Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. I am your host, Marcus Lloyd, and with me, as always, Mr. Antoine Malone. What's happening, Antoine?
What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to this live interrupt your programming
Yes,
edition of color
impromptu.
commentary.
Right.
Is this our version? This is our version of the breaking news.
Breaking news. Is that what we're going with on that?
Yeah,
I don't. Yeah, and that's the thing is, I don't know if it's breaking news,
it
but
really isn't, but neither is the breaking news
fair
when
enough.
they say it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, today,
Most of the time.
yesterday, we are getting into just like you said, an interruption in the midst of a conversation we've been having anyway. But today we're talking about some things that have been kind of happening in our own backyard, some racial, and if I can call it, not even, I'm gonna call it racist things that are happening right in our own backyard. And so I don't know, Antoine, there's uh, some of them in our backyard, and I think there's one thing that I just heard about, you were telling me about, that we might talk about, that's not in our backyard, but we might talk
Yeah.
about it anyway. But for this particular moment, we're going to talk about what's in the backyard. So I'm going to start
Okay.
kind of concentric circles, right? Which
All
is
right.
kind of right where we live. And I'm going to say we because Antoine and I live like 3 minutes from one another.
Right.
I get to office in a particular place in the neighborhood that I live near, where I live. And it's about 5 minutes away. And there's a church in our area that's a friend of mine. He and I were having lunch, and he told me about this vandalism that had happened at this church. I said, "Well, let me see what you're talking about, right?" And so he shows me these pictures of the church, and on the side of the church, really out in the front, a couple of things happened. One, there was a phrase that was bookended by swastikas, and it said basically "f n-word," basically. Like I can't even say the whole phrase in our listening audience, right? But f n-words basically, and then on literally like one of the doors of this church, uh in every window, like if you can picture a church, you're walking up to a fairly affluent church, right? It's got, it's got lots of money, so it's got some windows and stuff you're walking into the church. On every single window they put swastikas on that,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the side wall, they wrote a little message on the side wall, like "This is not my best work yet." And then they wrote the phrase, and I'm going to talk about this as much as I know. They wrote the phrase "skin/king" on there. Um, and so this is kind of, and so I posted it on my social, right, just to kind of let people see this is the kind of thing that's still going on, and people going nuts about this. So we thought, let's just jump on and talk about uh this particular issue along with some other ones. So Antoine, you again, you live right down the street. What are your thoughts when I was showing this to you earlier today? Any thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, it was one not of major surprise. It was
Okay.
surprise-ish. But it is a indicator of what feels like a slow clicking up of the
Mhm.
racial animus in our society.
You calling it slow clicking up?
Yeah,
I guess.
because there's little bits of things that show up in nationally.
Yeah.
There's just little bits, like it's almost like it's like click click. They're not big, huge things like a George Floyd
Right.
thing, and so they're not getting all this attention, but they're like flares, or they're like
Uh-huh.
leak outs
Yeah.
that makes me feel like there's an under rumbling that's growing that we're going to end up needing to face. And this is just one of many many instances where that's the case.
Right.
Um
In many
but
instances, the case that we even know about. Like
that we know
this
about, right?
right. Like I don't think this hasn't made the news yet.
This
You
is
know what
not
I mean?
on the yeah, I hadn't heard it
That's
from the news. I
right.
heard it from you.
So yeah, exactly. So I
And
don't,
I'm
and I
sure
don't
most
know.
people heard it from you too. Most of the people who are like, "Wait a minute, what happened in
Right.
in Frisco, Texas?"
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And that's, I think that's part of it. Is I don't know. I'm curious because I've been kind of locked in the office, but I'm curious what the response has been. I'm curious if this church, covered it up, or of course they did, but what did they say about it? So I had some contacts that are connected over at that particular church, and so I started just doing a little bit of digging. I tried to reach out to the pastor because obviously, the work that we're doing, and particularly around the race conversation, particularly with churches, this is kind of a great space for Threaded to jump in on and to try to engage in some aspect. And so started reaching out to the pastor. Hadn't heard anything yeah, I just kind of was able to do that not too long ago, but
Mhm.
found out that the pastor actually sent out a letter to the congregation and to even those who maybe are part of the preschool that's there and the schools that happen there, and just kind of sent out a letter to make sure people knew. I guess maybe when they came in there that they would know exactly what they're looking at, and let them know that this happened. And so I'm curious to see what this letter is. It's going to be sent to me here, and I'm going to be able to check it all out here soon. But I was also talking to another contact who works really closely and has some friends over at that church, and found out that this is not the first time that this has happened to that church. Um, people have apparently, I don't know if it's a serial vandalizer, if that's even the terminology that you use,
Mm,
a serial vandal who's done this, I guess, a couple of months ago. But from what
mm,
I understand, the level that they took it from where it was before to where it is now is a huge jump, right? Because not
mm,
only did they not only did they write those words on the side of the building or write those swastikas on the windows and the concrete and all the stuff right in front of the windows, they also
right.
lit a dumpster on fire.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a big dumpster fire that they lit up as
I
well.
didn't know about the fire.
Yeah, yeah, that was a thing. I didn't say too much about it in the post, but that was part of it as well. Which, at first, because when I was thinking about it, I was like, it sounds like something maybe, a teenager might do. But
Yeah.
this is
And
like,
I think that may also be what causes this to be not news. Like
uh
your first thought is, oh, it's some teenager that's come in and did a thing.
yeah. And before, the whoever vandaled it on the back of the building, but this is on the front of the building.
Mm,
So this was found out, I guess, this weekend. Maybe I think the letter that was sent out uh, was on uh, was on Sunday, and so yeah. Again, I'm just hearing about it here Tuesday. Is this Tuesday? I think it's
I
Tuesday.
think
Yeah,
today is Tuesday. I
it's
know I was all
Tuesday.
mixed up today too. I
Mm.
would show pictures, but we might be able to show the second picture, right?
Uh,
The
yeah,
one without the slur.
I guess so. I tried to to kind of wash out the F word there on there
Okay.
so that you could do it.
Let me see if I can pull the picture up because some people may not have seen it, and at least one of them
Yeah, exactly.
while you're talking about what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
So again, it's escalated. It's not the first time this happens, but it's escalated. Now, if people who maybe followed me for a while, probably, I don't remember how many years ago it was, but I was walking I remember it was an Independence Day. It was a 4th of July, and I was just out walking. I was just kind of taking a route, and we have some bridges kind of in our area, and I was kind of walking, and some of the pathways go under the bridges as part of the kind of the walking path, and under two bridges that I went under that Independence Day, they had something very similar to what is on the side of this building. Now, this is probably maybe 5 years ago that this happened, but it had said something about that same thing. Like, it said, "Inwards go home." And then you could see a spot under another bridge where they had tried to cover it up. So this is not, this sort of vandalism in which you're using the N word, these racial slurs. It's not new, period. Right. Like, this
Right.
is something, I mean, you can go into any sort of greasy spoon uh truck stop from in the south, and you get in
Exactly.
and go into a stall, and you're going to see this stuff all over, right? But to do it so blatantly out in the open, but even beyond out in the open, on the side of a church. And what's interesting about this church, and I had lots of people,
Oh no, I'm sorry
that's okay,
about
I had
that.
lots of people kind of texting me like, what is the church? I'm not giving the name of the church right now. But it is not a black church. it's
True.
it is
True.
the
Which is a
complete
key element
it's
to
a
this
key
whole thing.
element, right? It's what makes it so confusing to me,
Like, what are
because
you
not only
doing?
is it not a black church, it is probably one of the, if I can say, whitest churches
For
in the
real.
area.
Not
Like,
known for saying, I don't think they're known for saying anything about this
yeah,
conversation or whatever.
that's what I don't know. I don't know if they had said something in the midst that I missed, or I mean, this church, you can go, you went to their website, I mean, you couldn't. It doesn't look like there's a website because there's so much white on it. They got to go into dark mode to see the people who are in the church. It's just
The
so white. So I don't
jokes.
understand what this is about. But regardless of, the backdrop, or, the canvas on which this person chose to write their racial slur, the fact of the matter is that the racial slur has been laid down and written, and right here in our backyard. You know what I'm saying?
Which means that it's just nearby. And the point is, the point so much is, I mean, for me, is just that, yeah, like it's not, once again, it's not far away, and it's not I don't believe it's extraordinary. And it's
Yeah.
even less extraordinary than we think, than we know. Because even this, like, there's probably stuff that's happened around that we don't know about.
Right.
We just know about this because we're in the neighborhood.
Yeah. And it's a church. I think that's
And
another
it's a church.
that's
Yeah.
another interesting piece. Again, why
Yeah. That
make
they
that
choose
your
to write that on
backdrop
the church.
to drop your racial slurs on that. But to your point, it's close. It's it-
Yeah, tell me what your thoughts are. I know you asked me mine, and then you kind of was talking about it in general, but what was your first? Not so much when you got the news, but like when you went and you took pictures,
I
like
didn't take
with
those
your,
pictures.
you didn't take
Somebody
those pictures.
somebody
Okay,
gave those to me. Yeah.
so yeah, so what? Yeah, so then what? When you saw the pictures, what was your response to that, or thought, feelings?
It's I'll say all right, I'll say it like this. Um yeah, I'll say it like this. I remember, and I know people are gonna freak out when I tell this story because it doesn't seem to make sense. But if you can just listen to the story as a part of my expression of my experience in my life, right? Then this will be helpful because it's gonna have some triggers in it. I just need everybody to know it's gonna have some triggers. So in 2020, there was so much going on. And I was struggling, you know what I mean, because there was so much going on, and people around me, those who I had spent a lot of time with, in my neighborhood, in my area, who were white. Stuff was going on around me, and as George Floyd was happening and all the uproar, like nobody came and talked to me. Nobody checked in on me, right?
Hmm.
To see how maybe I was experiencing this, that kind of stuff. And I started to develop a kind of anxiety about our neighborhood, if you will. Um, because things were starting to heat up so much. There was so much talk. There was so much, discourse. And then, of course, the election came, and that just brought a whole nother level
Hmm.
of anger and hate and animosity. And we were trying to bring unity into the midst of that, but I could just see it. I could feel it. People at the church I was going to, people in the neighborhood that I was at. But I started to develop this kind of anxiety about my presence in this predominantly white space that I live in. In my even my own little neighborhood, this happened in our kind of extended,
Yeah.
neighborhood, but in my own little neighborhood, I'm the only male person of color in my neighborhood. And again, I happen to be a black man, which for many is kind of the top of the aggression chart. And what I've always experienced as being a black man in a predominantly white environment is that, you know, when white people are upset about something that's going on that involves black people, they attack and harass the blackest people who are closest to them. And so throughout my life, when there was stuff going on, the OJ incident, you know what I mean, like the LA riots, and like when people wanted to get out their racial animus, it was always heaped on me because I was the closest. They aren't going to drive over to the other side of the neighborhood. They had a brother
Hmm.
right here that they could take it out on. So there's
Hmm.
this anxiety that built up in my body from not only me but from my family, right? My kids. Now they are mixed kids, but they obviously look like black kids. And so when I remember when the 2020 election was going on, and remember, like, we had the election happen, but then it was like days for people to try to find out who was going to be the president, right? And again, it
Hmm.
was such a tense time. There was all this bickering and fighting. I saw neighbors talking in groups out as they walked around, and it just made me really anxious and nervous. And I remember I was sitting in my office at the time, and it was in the front of my house, and my back is to the street, right? And there's windows behind me, and there's back to the street. And they had just announced that Biden had gotten president, right? And I look out my window and I see just clusters like of neighbors kind of talking. I hear doors slamming and it would drop me. I find myself really anxious about like loud noises. And of course, like at noon, the first Saturday of every month at noon in our neighborhood, Antoine,
Mm,
you know what goes off? What goes
yeah,
off? Yeah. Tell the
the
people.
emergency. Yeah,
Yes, the emergency
the
tornado.
emergency testing
Yeah,
system. This
system
is only a
siren.
test.
Yeah, exactly. But it went off and I almost jumped out of my seat and I was terrified. Because I had dreams, I'd actually had nightmares of my neighbors coming to my house with shotguns and attacking me, like that there was a war happening and that they'd come after me. So I was literally in the midst of anxiety about that, to the point where I remember my children were trying to go out and like hang out with their friends. I was like, I need y'all to just stay in the house today. Like I just need you
Mhm.
to stay here. And so I say all that to tell you that when I see something like that, so close to where I live, it brings up some more anxiety. And I know the Christians out there, do not be anxious for anything, but in everything, prayer and petition, take your request to God. I get all that. But there is a feeling that comes that I have to battle, wondering who is this person, right? Because it's a anonymous thing that's been done. It could be done by anybody that you run into in our area, right? You could be at
Right.
the grocery store walking right next to this cat. I could be living next door to this cat. I'm not. I know. My neighbors are like, it's not me. I know. I know. Right. But I could be. I could be at the
Yeah,
gym working out with this cat, and
yeah.
then and not knowing at what point will it click. You said click, 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 and the heat comes up. That people lose their freaking minds, and
Mhm.
they need to take out their racial animus. And who is there to receive it?
Mhm.
You and me, because we in here. So that's what that does when I see that in my neighborhood. It does it when I see it other places too, but there's something about it in your own neighborhood.
Obviously,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
It's closer,
Yeah,
closer to home,
close
closer to
to the
your
home.
kids.
Yeah. So that's what I was feeling,
Mm,
when I saw that.
yeah, that's tough. That's tough because yeah, because it feels so out of hand. Well, for me, it feels so out of hand. Someone told me a long time ago that they thought I was a control freak. I'm not sure that I agree, but I do like a measure of control,
Sure, everybody
and
everybody does.
yeah, and like that's out of my control. And you're right. Like how in the world? Uh, Whenever I think about groups, whenever I think about so if you're in in movies or in shows, whenever there's the bad guys, the bad team, there's the
Yeah,
villain and there's the mastermind, usually the main villain who acts maniacally but typically strategically, and they usually have one henchman
yeah,
that is the loose cannon,
yeah,
and the henchman that's the loose cannon could just do anything, and typically at the you know at the dismay of the main leader, they're like, look, calm down, quit doing so much, you're overexposing us. And there are things like this that make me wonder, is this just the loose cannon? That's what I mean, like this is the loose cannons that acted this way, and even some of the people who may be planning something more are like, stop doing that. We're going to do this other thing,
yeah, yeah,
but it's almost like it's a clue or a warning, and we're completely speculating, right? It could
yeah.
be some 12-year-old kid that's going up there and doing this
Sure.
sort of thing, which is still a problem, by the way.
Fair enough. Yeah,
Let's not act like that's not a problem,
yeah,
right? As opposed to a grown man. But you can't help but wonder, as a black, as you're saying, as a black man watching the anti-racist movement um happening, where I almost posted earlier today,
mhm,
even before I saw those pictures, how interesting it is to be a black man, uh, a black Christian right now. If I stand up and I say, as a black man, I think there are racist problems to be fixed, that's a political statement
yeah,
immediately to
yeah,
people. And they assume a bunch of political ideologies, they heap all those things upon me. When in reality, dealing with racism is an everyday life thing. It's not a political, uh, you don't need to subscribe to a political worldview or
mhm,
political party
yeah,
to look at this as a black man and say, you know what, we might need to be a little more careful in our neighborhood. I don't care if you vote red or blue. If the person who did that is crazy enough and you happen to be in their sight and they happen to be bringing some sort of weapon to the party,
Uh-huh.
your skin color qualifies you to be the only other end of that weapon.
Hmm.
And you don't need to be politically aligned. We can talk about all your politics when your story is told after it's all done, said and done,
Yeah.
and we'll be like, oh my gosh, they killed the wrong kind of black guy. But at the beginning, it doesn't matter
Right.
because the politics doesn't actually play into like the real life thing on this.
Right.
And it's my white, I think many of my white brothers and sisters in Christ, I would say,
Hmm.
I would think they think this is a political conversation only. They
Yeah.
think this is only a political conversation. The only reason that you happen to be bringing up race, anything, is that you must be a leftist or you must be a liberal. And if you're that, then that means you're for killing babies. And if you're for killing babies, then we just can't. I can't hear even what you're talking about. When it has nothing to do with all of that, any of that. It's just very simple. It's just as a black person, just what you said, Marcus. That tells me that I don't know. Is my house next?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or is my kid's school next?
Yeah.
Or again, that's not politics. That's nothing to do with politics. That's
Right.
just that's life. And that's living with the potential that the racial animus that we work so hard to minimize in our society is being reversed and starting to animate all the more. And what to do about that. And whether this is a red herring for that sort of thing, or whether it's something that we should ignore, as black men, we don't have the luxury of acting like it didn't happen
Yeah.
when it's 3 minutes up the road.
And what's interesting, I was looking at, they sent out a letter. This particular church sent out a letter to a lot of the parents that their kids go to the preschool there, and I think there was something in the letter that was very telling to me, to everything you just said, right? Like we're talking about it, and we're just, um, we're trying to give it from a sense of a person who is black, who obviously, we were the target of that particular graffiti. Like again, it wasn't a black building, if you will. It wasn't a place where black people reside,
It
but
was
it
a
was.
message to us, though.
But it was a message to us. But what's so interesting, right, is that if you're not in this space, if you don't have a lot of interaction relationally, cross culturally with black people, right? If you're a white church and you don't have that kind of relationship, then you tend to say things that allude to that, right? One of the things that they said in their letter, when they were trying to reassure parents that the school was going to be safe for their kids, is that they said the officers we spoke to believe that this graffiti, while vile and disgusting, does not represent a threat to people who are inside the church. So if you think about that, there's a couple of different things on that, right? And I'm not throwing any shade on this. It's just something to be understood. A This church is so segregated, separated, and homogenous that the people who are coming are not people of color, not a black. There's no black people there. So this church is already saying that don't worry, it doesn't pose a threat to anybody inside the church, right? And I'm thinking about it in the sense of we don't have anybody here who they would target, because you could see from the message that they're targeting black people. Don't worry, black people actually aren't here, so they're not going to come looking for them over here.
Mm.
And I think that's a shame, you know what I mean? Because it actually creates a disconnect for that church sort of emotionally to get invested, because they think it doesn't have anything to do with them. They're
Right.
trying to let the church go, look, you're okay. There's no danger here. Don't worry. Business as usual. Keep it moving. As opposed to saying, hey, it doesn't seem to pose the police think that they're targeting people of color. And although that might not affect the majority of those who come to this church, it does affect our brothers and sisters who are black in this community.
Yeah.
And we as a church want to stand with our brothers and say, and they said it, that this is not a part of our ministry. This is not what we're about. And doggone it, we will stand up to this. And you can't go after our black brothers like that. That kind of stuff would be a very helpful thing to have in a letter or have in a statement or have in a press conference of some sort. It's an opportunity, really, to
Yeah.
be able to stand up and say, no, we're actually going to go deeper in on this to let you know that you can't scare us from being welcoming Black people, right?
Yeah,
Because
no, that's not what they're thinking at all. They're thinking, oh, they're mistaken. They've got us misidentified, and so this is an annoyance to them.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah,
about all it is. And I say the same thing about rich people and their taxes. I don't want to pay my taxes. Like you're just annoyed by the number. It doesn't actually affect your life, and so you're angry about the annoyance.
yeah,
But and for this is just an annoyance. Oh, we got to clean this thing off. Oh, we need to make sure that we add a little bit of security to make sure. But they don't really feel any real sense of. I, Maybe they do, but it doesn't appear to me. Let me put it this way: the typical response to a situation like this would be that you wouldn't feel any real danger, right? For all I know, maybe they do, but the story completely changes if this is a Black church,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
the people responding who happen to be. If it were a Black church and Black leadership, or if it was a white church with significant enough people of color in it, um, who are part of leadership, that conversation and the response to this changes.
Yeah,
It's different. It's past annoyance. It's not just an annoying thing. It's not just a, oh my gosh, we got to deal with this kind of thing. And I think that racism for white people is, for many white people, is that it's, oh my gosh, we got to deal with this, right?
yeah,
As opposed to it being what I was saying in like yeah, you're kind of saying something. As opposed to it being a real life consistent dynamic. It's a consistent dynamic in that it is always lurking, and if you don't know what that feels like, then to you it's like the only thing you can say is, oh, how many times does this happen a year? Oh, so it's got vandal twice. Okay, so it's just 2 times a year. Two people are being dumb and they did it.
yeah.
That's one way for you to think about it, because you have the luxury of it being an annoyance that
That doesn't affect.
intermittently
Yeah,
shows up into your life and doesn't have any real effect on you. But for Black people, every time something like that happens, it's like, okay, is this the moment
mhm,
when the tide begins to shift, right?
right.
And it is, and if you're not used to that thinking, you just won't be able to connect
Yeah,
and empathize well with people who see something like this and have an um, emotional response.
absolutely. And look, I had a pastor say that to me in the midst of George Floyd. I was like, hey, are you going to talk about these things from your pulpit and whatever? And he was very open. He said, it's a white pastor saying, but it's not really anything that concerns me in my church. And that was so telling. You know what I mean? Like, just it goes to the point again of what we need to, as the church, need to be able to foster, which is this actual understanding of the body of Christ, right? We need to understand the idea of collective. We need to understand the idea of all tribes, tongues, and nations, Ubuntu. This whole I am because you are, right? Like, if we thought collectively, particularly as a church, that's why I'm keeping it as a church. Um, if we thought collectively, we would recognize, again, when one part of the body suffers, everybody suffers. When one part of the body rejoices, everybody rejoices, right? And so it's not just an easy sort of line of, don't worry, this actually doesn't concern anybody inside here. You know what I mean? And again, that's not, I don't think that's fully what they were engaging, but I think there is a disconnect, because I know if I'd been talking to some of the white pastors that we run around with, the ones who've been texting me all day, right? When they saw this, they would have had a much different response to that, because there's skin in the game. They have relationship. They know, they have learned, they have taken time to actually look through the lens of people of color, specifically African Americans, and see what you're talking about and believe that. And so they step up and come to the aid. They stand up and use the platform to say, even though this was not written as a message to us inside this church, and again, that's a whole nother conversation, it
Mhm.
is a message to us, the church,
Yeah,
because it is targeting potentially our brothers and sisters
yeah,
who are Black.
yeah. I mean, if the person had vandalized the building and said
Yeah,
"F conservatives,"
yeah, it would have been a
different
whole, it
different
would have been a whole,
response,
yeah, sure,
or if it says "F Christians,"
yeah,
different response,
yeah,
right? And you're right. It would come out with all of a sudden it would be we won't be deterred. we won't allow fear to, it would probably likely be a spirited, uh an inspirational retort,
Yeah,
as opposed to a de-escalation only mode, um kind of thing. What the letter kind of sounds like is, hey, we need to make sure that people know that we want people to de-escalate. We want people to calm down and feel
sure.
safe,
And people to return. We don't want them to
and,
feel like
and
it's
we
an
want to
unsafe
listen. Yeah,
place.
and so you're solving that problem. But if the word was different, if it didn't say F Negroes,
Which is not the N word, but it was there.
right, right, right. But if it didn't say what it said and said something else, a title more associated with that church,
Yeah.
um, it could say F Frisco, and you might get a different response,
Not
right?
there.
So,
It's a McKinney church. So
McKinney,
they'd be like,
yeah,
they would go, yeah,
true,
on the side
true,
of it.
true. That's
Yeah.
right. It's yeah. They're McKinney Church, but you get the point. So,
Yeah.
maybe not with the state, but certainly Christian, and certainly I feel almost certain about conservative. Like they would defend themselves in some way, and we didn't hear a whole lot about it. So,
Wonder if this is the is if this is the way that you get churches to start thinking about each other. You know what I mean? Like, so to your point, right? If they had used a general historical white slur on a white church, I don't think there'd be any brothers from the other side of town with
thinking
batting an
about
eye.
that either.
They ain't thinking about none of that stuff.
True, true
Which
that.
is kind of what we see when it happens on the other side, like,
Also,
right?
also a problem. Yeah,
Exactly. So the fact that you used the N word, and now it's almost like you made a clarion call for black people to pay attention to this church, which they never did before. Right? Is this a way? Again, opportunity missed. Maybe not missed, because there's still a
yeah,
chance. It hadn't hit the news, right? The news is calling me, right? So they may get a chance if they can, if they believe it, they could make a statement that would have people go, oh, this is a church that's interested in this. Now, I don't know. Again, I don't know anybody there. I don't know. But this is maybe a church that can put out a clarion call to maybe some African Americans in the community and say, no, we are with you and we care about this. And so we want to not only be with you in the midst of this vandalism in which we are now experiencing, but we actually want to be with you in the midst of the fear and the anxiety that you feel every day by knowing that this can happen to you. And we also want to be with you in the midst of the trials and tribulations that you are continuing to suffer because of people's mindset like this that we've had go through this country.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just the common sensitivity that you would have
It's
with
common if you have community.
if you have community with I'm about to say, with common sensitivity that you would have with people who you care about.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so many reasons why. I mean, and I don't want to get into bagging on the church. I love
No, no,
I
we don't
love
need
the
all that right now. Yeah.
love the concept of the church, but I there's so many barriers to seeing people as people, that you form a relationship enough with, that what's going on in their life matters to you,
Yeah.
that um, create and again, and create a spot where we don't get a response that, like you said, seizes the opportunity
Yeah.
to
To be
completely
truthful.
counter,
Yeah.
you know like, how do you turn this situation into the very opposite of what the person
Yeah.
intended?
Exactly.
Yeah, you do it by using it to bring people together and to rally people instead of, you know
Instead of washing it off and moving on
yeah,
and missing. But again, it
right,
has
yeah,
to
because
be
somebody was telling you, someone on your post was like, hey, where can we wash it off? And there was a part of me that's like, well,
that.
let's leave it up there for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just to remind people that it's there. You don't have to, like,
you don't have
but
to
I
say
think,
this is our mantra or anything, but you
yeah, yeah, but let's just hold on, because I think people need to know that this stuff is
it's
still happening. Yeah,
now look, they don't.
get rid of it too quick.
Yeah, and they don't need too much. I mean, this is only one incident, that's of a couple actually that's even happened in this area, right? And you talk about relationship. One of my dearest friends through college and even now is of Indian descent, and so I was completely mortified when in Plano this video was released of this woman who is completely harassing and assaulting
Absolutely.
these four Indian women outside of a very nice area of Plano, which is just not too far from where we live, right? It's kind of like it's just the next kind of town, if you will, or suburb outside of where we live. And it's over in a very wealthy area as well. You know what I mean? It's a nice spot. People go down there to hang out. And this woman comes out. Again, it's a video. So if you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. It's a video. It's a Plano woman sort of saying racist remarks to these Indian women who were outside of this restaurant, and the video comes in as it's going on. You know, nobody ever anticipates. You know what I mean? I guess some people anticipate things and they get their camera out, but this one wasn't anticipated. And this woman comes out and she is just going off on these four Indian women. Now, I think she was a bit intoxicated. I mean, it was outside of a very popular wine area. And I think she had had something to drink, but that again, to the point of it, that doesn't excuse it, right? What sobriety conceals,
Right.
alcohol reveals. You know what I mean? So what
Ah.
this woman, what this alcohol, if you will, started bringing out of her were these terrible things. Go home, right? She was like, "Why don't you Indians go home, right? If India's so great, why don't you go back there? You know, if you, I hate you, curry." B words, you know what I mean? Like, I hate effing Indians. She said that multiple times throughout her rant. She's like, Indians, they're everywhere. I just hate them. You know what I mean? It's a terrible rant. And she proceeds to try to, everybody's videoing her. So she's trying to take phones. She's hitting the ladies. I think there were four ladies there. I think she hit three of them in the process. And as she goes along, I don't know what minute it is. It's probably 4 minutes into the 6 minute rant. She's like, I don't know if something kicked in from a sobriety standpoint. She started to go, okay, all right, I'm sorry. I have overstepped my bounds. Let's just shake hands, peace. And of course, these ladies like, what? Here's
Not
been
now.
4 minutes of this. And she's like, well, all right, you don't want to shake. Let me shake with you. You don't want to shake. You don't want to shake. And they're like, no, I don't feel safe. They're calling the police and trying to get the police out. And she's like, well, F you then, right? Like, you
Mm.
were like, okay, well, that wasn't sincere at all. But it's again, this very close to home engagement where people, and I'll say it like this, you said it's like this ticking click 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 of sort of
Mhm.
the heat is going up. Tend to use dials, like the dial is turning up. People are
Mhm.
becoming much more emboldened to be able to do these kinds of things, whether it's graffiti racism openly, right? Again, it's not that that's old. They've been doing that for a long time, but to graffiti it on the side of a church facing a major thoroughfare, like, that's bold. And then this woman for 4 to 6 minutes literally just not only one time to come and do some racial slurs, she walks away and then
I know, and comes
decision and
back.
comes back multiple times. And they're just like, why do you keep coming back? And then she's like, you need to go home. And she's like, and they're, I love it. She's on the phone with the police. There's a white woman who's telling us this. And the woman stops and goes, I am not white. I am Mexican. And these Indian women are like, wait a second. And one says, well, if Mexico's so good, why don't you go back to Mexico? Isn't it the same thing? And she's like, I am a Mexican American. And these women are
Mm.
like, we're Americans too. She's like, are you a real American? They're like, well, we're naturalized. See, you're not a real American. Well, how do you
Oh
know we're
my
not
gosh.
Americans?
And
I can tell by
does
the
this
way
not sound like the script from the dragon and
it's what
the Bruce Lee the dragon story? Like,
oh
you're
yeah,
not a
that's
real American.
right. It's totally Jason
It's
Lee
like
playing Bruce
right
Lee, the Bruce
in
Lee
the
story.
script right there.
That's true,
Anyway,
man.
sorry.
So I don't know. So that happened last week. National news, right? I actually didn't hear about it until this weekend. I don't know where I was. I don't know what I was doing last week. I didn't hear about it, but I saw it this weekend. I was like, "What is happening?" And
Yeah,
again,
so yeah, that happened. Well, I'm gonna hit this racist thing real quick too. The whole thing's racist. The volleyball thing. So in the volleyball thing, what happened is Duke is
wait, are we
playing.
finished? Are you just going right past?
Oh, past Plano. Oh well, maybe not.
You just ain't gonna drop in on Plano for a second.
I mean, well,
You
try.
just drop and go
I
like
feel like she's yeah. I feel like once again,
she was there.
it's
She
a
got caught.
yeah. Once again, it's a flare. This is what I mean. Like, so she where she would normally not say that stuff out loud,
Yeah,
we caught a flare.
yeah,
And it's like, and what it does is it tells it tells me that there's way more going on. There's this potentially pent up
yeah.
thing that's just slowly seeping out in little flares. that I'm not trying to fearmonger. This isn't about like making anyone afraid. This is about observation
Yeah,
and just saying, hey, let's pay attention. It feels like, and maybe it's the trauma, maybe it's my own racial trauma in my life that makes me feel
sure,
this way.
sure.
But it feels like when I see things like that, it's like what I always say is, well, of course that happened. That's
Uh-huh.
what I would like when my wife brings me something. I'm like, well, of course that happened. I'm never surprised by anything racist that happens ever.
Sure, sure. Which is a sad
Never. I'm
story.
never surprised by it. It's always like, well, of course that happened.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that always goes, which I don't say out loud, but I'll say out loud here. And there's a lot of people who are happy that it happened. There's a lot of people who, when they saw the swastikas on this building, they felt something. They felt something good about that.
Wait, when you say a
But
lot of people,
a
I mean,
lot of,
that's
I'm happy to
you
say,
you
I'm comfortable with saying a lot of
okay,
people.
alright.
I think there are people who look at that and they're not like, oh, that's a shame,
Are
but
you
they're
saying a
like,
lot of people who would like to have done it themselves? Is that kinda
yeah,
thing?
yeah, yeah. They
Okay,
like that somebody did it, but they don't want to be the
okay,
one to do it. They
okay.
like that somebody told these Indian people that they need to go home.
That's the one that I would say a lot of people would go with. The
Look,
swastika
man,
thing feels really out there.
well, you and I disagree on this because I think there's way more on this
Okay.
swastika thing than than we think. But
I think the people who like what old girl said in Plano are on their way to the swastika, right? They're just not there. I'm not comfortable saying a lot of people would do
I
like
feel
the
you. All right.
swastika, but
Well, I
I
am.
do think, particularly
I'm
in this
comfortable
area,
saying it, and
yeah,
I'm comfortable saying that they are. Again, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm comfortable saying that,
that's fine.
and
We can have that.
certainly with Michelle. Oh, I don't know if that's her name. With the lady, the Plano lady. Certainly with her, there's a bunch of people who wish they could say stuff they can't say it out loud,
Sure, sure. Yeah,
and they're like, well, I'm glad she said it.
sure.
Somebody had to say it. I hate that she had to get taken to jail, whatever happened to her,
Right.
but
And can I
somebody
say,
need to say it.
and what's
Good
interesting
for her,
too,
someone said as they were making their broccoli
yeah,
in the kitchen. Somebody was, it was brought to someone while they were cooking, and they said,
yeah,
you know what, good for her.
good. Glad to see somebody
I'm glad
talking
to see
about it.
somebody said something, and then they went on with their broccoli and kept it moving. You
See, and
know,
I think you're absolutely right. And and what I would say is the distinction or a distinctive about that is that rant that she put out there. Remember what she said: "I am not white. I am Mexican." She was not claiming whiteness. She was claiming an ethnic
yeah, sure,
sort of
sure,
foreign
sure,
identity, if you will. You know, somebody who's not supposedly from here. Obviously, she was saying I'm a Mexican American, but
yeah,
in the midst of the conversation, it seems like she kind of passes for white as you're kind of talking and seeing, but she was like, I'm Mexican, right? So this is the why I think the group is larger is because I don't think it's just white people who would say, certain groups go home. And we've seen it. We've seen it at other
oh yeah,
places where people have
absolutely.
gathered and done that. So I
It's
think
at the
it's a
cookout too,
bigger
by
group.
the way, for the brothers
Yeah, that's what I'm
in the
talking
room.
about.
Like,
Yeah, I know.
we know what gets said at the cookout.
Yeah. This is something
So
that's, and it needs to be said that this is not just
just a
something that
white
is
person, yeah,
relegated for white people, right? Like I
sure, of
hear and
course,
see it in all kinds of spaces that I go into that are not white spaces. It is open and honest and said, and ain't nobody trying to stop it, right? And that's what you got to be on the lookout for because again, it's what you're talking about. These sort of flares is exactly what Dr. King was talking about when he described negative peace versus positive peace, right? The negative piece is that there's no chaos and nothing going on. And so you think there's nothing happening, but underneath the surface, there's all this stuff churning. And all it
yeah,
takes for that stuff to blow up is just some kind of incident that drops in a George Floyd, a Buffalo, or whatever. And all of a sudden, all that stuff is not flares, it's just out. And
yeah,
so the opposite is a positive piece, right? The positive piece creates an environment and opportunity for that sort of that rumbling that's underneath, be it from whatever cultural group it is, that they get a chance to get that out and experiment with it with others, right? They get to say it in a controlled environment with the folks to try to engage it differently, which is part
yeah,
of what we try to help do in the midst of the work we do, even at Threaded in some of our small group and our Let's Talk Race class, which we've got starting here in a little bit, and our small groups that are coming up, is be able to put people from different cultural backgrounds in a place and start to, from a biblical foundation, we start to share our lives and our experiences together so we can understand one another better. And it creates this I've seen it in almost every group, right? I see this transformation of those who are sitting in isolation, having these conversations, to those now who are connected with the idea of community and connection to people. They've got skin in the game, relationship. And
Yeah.
now they know that when these things happen, to where the F N words on the side of the buildings, or if an Indian is getting reamed out in the midst of it, they don't think, oh, too bad for that person. They go, no, no, no. I got people in that group,
Yeah.
and their people are my people. I ain't gonna let nobody stand up and do that, right? That's what we need more of, but we have to create those spaces, which is why that's our ministry and what we're doing. And because somebody's got to say
And the
something.
church can lead the way with that.
I believe they should be
I
able to
mean,
lead
and
the way.
not just can. Well, yes, can, but should.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's good.
yeah, absolutely should do that.
Because
We as believers should be going first with all of that.
right, we should be able to stand up and so when you want to talk about this volleyball thing that happened over at Duke and BYU,
So yeah, Duke
tell
and
about
BYU. Yeah,
that's
so Duke
so
BYU. There's a volleyball game, female volleyball game, and there's only one black person that's playing in this game with everyone. And every time the black young lady from Duke would get up to do her volleyball serve, someone would shout out the N word to heckle her
mm,
as she's serving. So it wasn't one time; it was a repeated occurrence, and the story got national news because the game went all the way on. If you know anything about volleyball, you know that you don't serve just once; you
right, it's not
serve
just like one
over and
game,
over
it's
and
like
over. Right?
it's 5 or 7.
Yeah, and nobody said anything and did anything. Eventually, BYU banned. They were to figure out who it was, and they banned that person from coming to the games. But the criticism, the,
It seems so trite, when you say,
yeah,
"Hey,
yeah,
you
you
don't get
can't
to come
come.
to these games no
You don't
more."
get to come to
That's
these
what's gonna
games.
happen to
That's
you.
it.
When
Yeah,
you come in and you yell the racial slurs to people on the court, you're just banned.
you got to go.
Welcome back. Man,
Uh,
yes.
but it took them a couple days to do something about that, and the whole game went on with no one doing anything or
Yeah,
saying anything, which is really the bigger issue. So that was the last, I guess, little bit of a story that I think we'll respond to
yeah,
with regard to that. Her godmother had to bring it up on Twitter or
uh-huh,
some social media deal, and the Twitterverse or the social media groups grabbed it and really made it a deal, made it a conversation, almost a national conversation. And unfortunately, it appears as though BYU responded to the social media backlash more than it responded to the actual incident. At least that's the way it looks.
mm. I think that's such a tough thing to
What are
hear.
you doing though, Marcus? Okay, you in that crowd. Somebody, black girl, somebody yells,
Are you kidding me right now?
N word. Yeah, but
I
yeah,
would be
what
on the news tonight
he
if that
said? I'm
happened.
on the news.
I would be, because I have done that before, right? And not yelled the N-word at people, right?
You've
But
not yelled in.
I got no problem. None. I am the first one up and like, no, 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 not happening. Right? The game would
Yeah.
stop. It's not happening. But that's personality, right?
Yeah.
That's just me. I've had to do it before. I've had to do that for myself because people wouldn't do it for me, right? I remember playing ball in my predominantly white area, and every time I would run the ball, these guys from another town that was kind of a rural town, they would punch me underneath the thing and they would call me the N word. And when I'm running
Yeah.
off, they'd be yelling the N word at me as I run on and run off. And I remember going to the
Mm.
coach and like, Coach, hey, they're calling me this, whatever. And the coach is like, man, don't worry about that. You just play your game. And I'm like, what? Like I can't get anybody to stand for me. So so on
I
the
just gotta keep it.
next play that I got, they got an elbow to the throat and I ran a 35-yard touchdown against them and then
Mm.
said, who's the N-word when I got in there and scored on him. Right. So that's how you have to kind of do those kinds of things for yourself. You know what I mean? I've had to stop. I'm sorry, I'm getting in a rant right now. I had a
Mm.
babysitter. I was staying at a friend's house in a predominantly white neighborhood, staying at a friend's house. His mom left and left us with a babysitter. And when that mom left, this dude started calling me little N-word. He was
Mm.
like, "Hey, little, well, let's call
Tough.
it ninjas for now. Hey, little ninja, what you
Tough.
want for dinner? Hey, little ninja." This is a white dude. It's a white dude,
Tough.
boots, all stuff. Hey, little ninja. Hey, little ninja. All night. Hey, little ninja. I was 7 years old.
Mm.
little ninja, come over here. And I knew, no, I was 8 years old. And I remember he came in, we were going to sleep that night. And he came in and said, "Hey, little ninja, you want me to put your shoes out?" And I jumped up to my feet, tears in my eyes. And I said, "You don't ever get to call me that. I'm sick and tired of it. If you call me
Mm.
that one more time, I will go get some of those ninjas and bring them back here and see what happens." I was crying and he was like, "Oh man, sorry, didn't know." You know, and so yeah, so I say all that to go, I had no problem standing up. If I can do it for myself, I know I can do it for
You
other
you
people.
you do it in
But you
I
asked
hear
me
you.
that, are you assuming that most people will not
I,
engage that way?
what I think what I was thinking is like the first person's like the first time someone says it is like
Sure.
really distasteful and you
Or
feel
you
like
don't even
somebody
believe it. You're like,
yeah,
"Did
yeah,
I
or
just
somebody around them would be you expect that somebody around them would just be like, even if they agree with it, they're just like, hey, this ain't the place, like just would shut it down. After the second or third time, uh I expect I expect that somebody should be saying something. Now, it's tough for me because if I'm like, it depends on where I am in relationship to the person. I don't know. I don't know what I would do. Look, on any given day, I might, I might, I might say something. See, my problem with saying something is that once I access a certain emotional arena,
Yeah,
um, then
yeah, I get you.
it's harder for me to come back, which is why I try to
Sure.
stay away from that arena as
I
much as
get
I
that.
can. So I might I might try to find a way to deal with it uh
Well, yeah,
through
yeah, yeah, you may have to.
conversation or something, like, but I wouldn't be aggressive right away. Um what's the word? I'm trying to find the word. It's not domestically. It's
Diplomatically?
diplomatically. I try to find a diplomatic solution, or maybe I would go to someone in the school authority
Sure.
like, hey, somebody needs to deal with this because
Right.
that's an unacceptable thing. I probably wouldn't confront the person if they but if they were right next to me,
Yeah.
I might
You would
confront
think
them.
they were talking to you. I mean, if
That's what
they
I'm
were
saying. I
really next
might
to you, well,
confront
look,
them.
hey,
I
if
might be
they right
like,
next to you, you need to run.
yeah.
You know what
I
I
mean,
mean?
well, the audacity.
So
Either
I'm
look,
saying
the
you
audacity
in
of
trouble at
saying
that
that
point.
with me right next to you is
Right.
like, oh, you
The
just gonna say
audacity
that
of
while I'm sitting right
saying it.
next to you? I am. How I ain't my sister. So
But the audacity of saying it openly in a public
anyway,
space is that's what freaks
but
you out.
it's
When it
Duke and
happens, you're just
BYU.
like, and I agree. And this is part of what I'm curious about, right? Like, for me, I'm going, okay, if I was in that crowd, I would start looking at other brothers and be like, all right, we need to do this, right? I give them the look, the look,
Oh yeah,
right? And then we might go handle it. I mean, not in a I'm not fighting, but we just gonna go shut it down. So I'm thinking, are there no other people of color there? You know what I mean? I can understand that maybe her parents weren't there because it's a traveling game. She plays for Duke, right? Like, so it
yeah.
was far. This was her godmother. I don't know if the godmother like saw a video or what.
I don't know
Maybe
how it
she
worked
was there.
either.
Maybe her godmother's white. Like, we don't even know, right? But it's again the lack of, now it's a sport that we don't really show out in either. You know what I mean? We don't have. I mean, named for me right now
You can't.
or
You gonna have to finish because I ain't able to do it.
you can't
I
do
don't.
it.
I don't
So
know anybody. Period in
right.
volleyball, but certainly
Well,
no.
but I guess
No,
if you gonna get called the N word every time you serve, it ain't a place you want to go play
ain't
anyway.
a place.
You know
It
what I
ain't
mean?
like
Based
hockey
on the
where if you
yeah,
got to throw a fish, you can
you know
throw
what I
it, and
mean? You
it's
can do
legal.
it. So it speaks to, again, the sort of, if you could call it, the homogenous sort of the homogeneousness of that sport, at least when you get to the collegiate and probably professional level as well. I'm
Yeah,
sure there are black volleyball teams
yeah,
somewhere, you know what I
yeah.
mean, or
But
mixed teams, but
but the theme of the podcast is it's just another leak. It's just another
it's
flare.
yeah,
So it's another very small thing that when you look at it, you're like, that's probably not that big a deal. But when you collect these things, it's like click, 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 click. You start to see just little, and you add the political stuff that's going on. Like there's so much feeding these fueling these
yeah,
I don't know, this
And
undercurrent of pent up energy
can I give
that
an
it
alternate
might
to
be
that?
coming soon. Go
Here's
ahead.
the alt, the possible alt to it.
Okay.
Right, we're talking about it as these flares, this sort of pent up aggression, right? And I would say if you're looking at definitely the woman in Plano, like that's pent up aggression for sure. Um, it could be, and I'm just giving an alt because we're here. This is what we do. It's kind of how we do it. The writing on the wall, right, of the church could be, as we said, it could be just a 12-year-old who's trying to do something funny, right?
Mhm.
Now, you want to get a percentage on how much I think that that's true? It's very low, but I'm just trying to give an alt. Now, at the game, again, I'm just telling an alt, but I don't even believe these as I'm saying them outside.
Sure.
I'm just because I'm trying. Part of me was wondering, okay, what if at the game, because I know this is what's happened to my kids at school. You know, some of these white kids, they just listen to the music all the time and they like to say the N-word and they like to just try it out on people. I mean, when I was growing up, I would have people always trying it out on me to see if they can get away with saying it, and it was funny to them, right? It
Mm.
wasn't, they didn't have the connection to it. They didn't have the anxiety that comes and the fear and all that. Like they thought it was funny. And so they would just try it out to see, let me see what happens when I try this word out. Out of nowhere, it would just
Yeah,
be
just to
we'd be on the
get some
playground, like
attention or
just
get a
for the
laugh.
attention. So there's a part of me that wonders in this game, this volleyball game, if it's not just some, I would say teenagers, but it's supposed to be a college game. Let's call them college students, kind of throwing out the N word just to be funny. You know what I mean? Even that is ridiculous. I mean, the disconnect and the ignorance and the naivete they have around the what that word means and how it's played out historically, to be able to yell that out in a public place for everyone to hear, particularly a person of color, a black person to hear. All right, I'm done with the alt. I don't even believe it anymore. I just was trying it out in my mouth.
Anymore. You didn't believe to begin
I
with.
know I didn't, but I needed to try the whole thing. I
But
needed to just
the
see
college
all of it.
student probably knows the weight of the N word.
They should. But again,
I'd be very surprised given all the stuff that we've had in this year that
agree.
they saying that because they know it's going to produce some sort of outcome in that person to distract them to say it in the
Yeah,
purest form. I just want to heckle you to throw you off your game. I'm gonna
yeah,
call you
that's
N
it.
word.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna call you an N word. And just to get you, just because I want you to be off your game. So they know that the word has an effect.
yeah.
Um, but even if they're using it that way, it's still a flare, right?
It is. It is.
Because it's
And
still like it's sitting in there.
it's
And
not a it's not a it doesn't it doesn't help. It doesn't help either. I'll say it like this. So clearly it's probably not a Duke fan, right? It's not a Duke fan, right? And they're in
no,
Utah.
because yeah,
Because a Duke fan, they want him to be successful. They're not trying to mess this girl up, right?
right.
So you're in Utah. It's LDS country, and I grew up with tons of LDS. Got so many friends in the midst of LDS, but the LDS have a history with black people that most of them either don't know or are trying to push past. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah,
constantly, my friends are constantly like, "Man, I'm telling you, we don't think like that anymore. That's not the way it is. I know that was I know that was Brigham Young, and that's how he thought, and but that's not how we do anymore. Let me give you a message from our elders and the things like so. I don't think it's it, but the mantra, the history follows them around, right? I mean, I got Mormon missionaries that come to my house, and I'm always asking them about it. And sometimes they don't even know about the history, but the histories follow them around. If the LDS want to change their mo, right, and their reputation in this space, the last thing they need is some LDS student from
yeah,
BYU yelling that at a
yeah,
public game. And even that should have inspired
yeah,
more people in the crowd to be like, bro, don't you know what this is doing for our religion? Don't you know how much this
yeah,
is it's furthering an understanding or thought process, and they would call it maybe even a misconception about
yeah.
our religion. Like that should have been enough skin in the game, if you will, to try to stop this person as well. Like people just not reading the room anymore? I don't understand.
Like the collective room.
The
Well,
collective
and
room.
as usual, it's the response, right? So when it comes to these sort of racial things, the response has more effect than the I think than the actual incident. And repeatedly we see that, George Floyd. We can look back at almost all the names that we would mention, right? And the issue of course is the action. So we're not saying that the action should be, but the a far greater concern even to the action is the response. And
Yeah.
if you don't respond correctly, the proper response, this isn't news. If someone gets called the N word and then someone in the vicinity of that person says, "Look, shut down," you know what I mean? You're not gonna say that. Or if somebody, the security guard comes up, pulls the person, young man out, or young woman, whoever it is, and says, "Listen, we're not gonna do that. Keep saying that. You're gonna be out of here."
Right.
There's no news story then,
Yeah. Easy.
right? Because the response dealt with it. It's the problem. The problem is with the response, and the response is as loud as the action itself, and that's actually what produces protest. I tell people all the time, it's it's the response that produces protest, because we know that people are going to be racist. We know
Sure.
that there's going to be
Yeah.
racist people.
It's good.
We know there's going to be murderers. We know there's going to be people who do bad things. The issue is, are we going to be a society that slowly begins to accept these bad things
Yeah.
and normalize them? And if the
Keep,
response
keep,
moves us
or keep
toward,
allowing them. Yeah.
yeah, keep allowing them. And if the response is more toward that, then yes, that's when you raise your hand,
Yeah.
right? That's when you grab a sign and protest, or you sign a petition, or you get people to vote in a particular way, because suddenly now the system, or the community, and potentially the system isn't responding
Mm-hmm.
appropriately. And in this particular scenario, that's what happened. The response wasn't right. You got some protests on through social media, and then you got the right response, right? Or a good
Or
response.
Aries.
So
So, and
yeah,
that goes to what I think we've said on this, show several times. And we'll start to wrap it up. I know we
yeah,
could be here all
yeah,
day. But you know, there is always this conversation, right? Where people are trying to, if you look historically, right? And we're talking about things that are historic, and people are like, look, I wasn't there, right? I'm not responsible for what my ancestors did, right? And let's just say that's true. That if we would say, okay, look, none of us is responsible for what happened previously, but we are all responsible what happens in the present, right? If the thing that happened historically continues to happen through your present time, then you now share responsibility for what
right,
happened in the past. You put your name in the hat, right? You start high-fiving those people and getting your DNA on them, right? You get in the boat and you start rowing with them. Whatever analogy you need, you are with them. And so if we as a society, if our response tends to be the kind of response that you would see historically about somebody writing, the N word on the side of a church, if we don't respond to it, then that's what people did back in the day. If people, if you in the past, people used to sit out and just yell the N word at folks while they were doing stuff, and nobody said anything. And if that's what we're doing right now, then we're in the same place as we were in the past.
right,
And in the past, people used to walk up and have the audacity to walk up to four people of color and just rant on them and hit them and assault them, right? That's what happened in the past. So if that's still happening and we are allowing it, and our response is not a definitive no or definitive hell no, then we are aligning ourselves with our past, with our past ancestors, and what had been experienced by them and how they participated in it. So the question becomes, who are you going to be? Like, which side are you jumping on? Are you going to be on the side that when you look back in history, people go, but you're saying the same things and responding the same way as these cats? Okay, well, look in the past. Which response do you find appropriate and moral?
yeah,
And do that.
yeah,
Do that.
yeah. Well said.
Man, look, hey, thanks for everybody. I know we had people coming in and out. And for those of you who are listening from a podcast, we did this live and we just were ranting. We forgot to even
Yeah, I
ask
know
the
this is not
audience.
not like our normal. But Roland, thanks for the comment.
Yeah, I
Appreciate you.
appreciate you, Roland, coming in and doing all that, and just all the comments. At least I know for even my socials that people were responding to. What we want to do, again, this is colored commentary, right? Like, we want to be able to create a space where we can help people look inside, the lenses of different skin colors. Um, it is a very colorful world, and I hope that it's been helpful for you even to hear what two black men think about the N word being written on a church in their neighborhood. We can't speak for our Indian brothers and sisters, but we know what it's like to be on the ends of those who are ranting and telling us to go home and to that we don't belong here. We don't play volleyball. I mean, I tried to play a little
I
ball. I
mean,
can do
I'm
a little
okay
sim.
at it.
I'm okay. I'm not
Not anymore though.
nobody's putting me on a team. And
I
my
gotta slide some more. I need you to slide
Slice
some more
well
to me
too. All
before.
right. See, you just gave him another reference. You gave him a Wiz reference. Looking through the lens, it's just seeing the Wizard of Oz from another tale. So yes, this is color commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. We want you to be able to look through different lenses, and so as we do our work and our show, we want you to stay colored.